This is labor preparation. I'm calling this the pelvic floor edition. You can do this at any time. In fact, I recommend even before you're pregnant, and you can do it all the way through your whole pregnancy. So we're going to look at the pelvic floor this time. So in other videos, we looked at upper body mobility, pelvic mobility, but the pelvic floor plays a vital role in birth. It's where the baby gets into that mid-pelvis and takes a 90-degree rotation, but it's also where the pelvic floor needs to yield and open for baby to be born. And unfortunately, a lot of us walk around with tension in the pelvic floor. So we're going to look at ways to help gently stretch, relax these muscles, and a pose or two to help strengthen the glute muscles so the pelvic floor doesn't have to work so hard. So the first thing we're going to do is a pose that I go to, I think, all the time, to be honest, at least in every prenatal yoga class and every postnatal yoga class, and with my own body when I'm feeling a little stressed. It's called 360 breathing. So we think about the 360 degrees of your rib cage, so that when we inhale and the diaphragm, this dome-like muscle of your respiratory system, drops and spreads, it pushes everything from underneath the diaphragm into the pelvic floor. And then the pelvic floor naturally gets a little stretch and release, especially against those tense muscles. So I like to use a strap. If you don't have a strap, you can simply use your hands. Maybe you have an old tie or something from a bathrobe, but I'm going to use the strap. I like this because it gives me feedback that when I breathe into it, I can feel the resistance against my rib cage. So sit well. See if you can feel your pelvis nice and balanced, your rib cage balanced. Relax your shoulders, and then focus on breathing into either your hands or your strap. So I'm going to try that. A deep inhale, you can see how my strap's expanding. And exhale, you can see how the strap starts to slacken. So try that a few more times. I know you're going to see this in pretty much all our videos. It's one of my go-to. Nice. All right. So keep that going on your own. So along with 360 breathing, where we're getting through the whole rib cage, another of my favorite is child's pose, where the focus is particularly on the back ribs. So when I get into child's pose and I'm resting there, I like to think of these warm, welcoming hands on my back ribs. I'm going to breathe into that. So remember the idea that the diaphragm can fully expand, the back ribs can expand, and that's going to help the pelvic floor stretch. Now, if you're doing this in preparation to be pregnant or even postpartum to help your pelvic floor, you can do it with your legs together. But obviously, if you're pregnant, we want to make space for baby. All right, so let's get on all fours and come into child's pose. If you want, you can put a blanket or a block underneath your head. I'm going to forego that and just let my arms come down. And when I'm in child's pose, I'm going to really think about breathing into those back ribs. So when I inhale, I get all this expansion. And when I exhale, it's helping me release the tension. Try that a few times on your own, feeling that big opening of your back ribs and a soft release. The next one I want to do is starting to get a little bit of a rocking into the hips to start to help stretch the pelvic floor out. So you might be thinking, how do you know if your pelvic floor is tight? Well, first of all, I'm always a fan of working with a pelvic floor PT because they can do some internal work and really give you some feedback. But there are some indicators that I talk about in our prenatal yoga classes that you can start to notice those habits. Like, oh yeah, I have that pattern. So one of them would be tailbone pain, constipation, it hurts when you poop, pain with vaginal penetration. I call it the second P. It's like you pee, you get up, there's still a little bit more. Often those that tuck their tail or clench their glutes or clench their jaw, those tend to be indicators that you have tension in your pelvic floor. So learning how to relax and stretch those muscles can be really beneficial. So let's look at one of my favorite. So this is called a rocking squat. I'm going to use 2 blocks for this. So simply taking my feet out to the side, lowering myself down and letting my hips release from side to side as I rock. So when we open the pelvic outlet, which squatting actually does, I'm letting the 4 bony points between my pubis, my tail, and my sit bones widen here, and that can help stretch the pelvic floor muscles. So it's a little nice pelvic rock. Now, if you have a breech baby and you're past 36 weeks with a breech baby, or you have placenta previa, or a lot of pubic pain, I wouldn't do this one. But the next one you absolutely can do. All right, I'm going to keep using my block. So now I'm straightening my legs, widening my feet. And when I internally rotate my legs, I'm widening my sit bones. And then I will soften my knees, back up a little bit with my hips, and reach my arms forward. So now I'm lifting my tailbone, widening my sit bones, and I'm getting a really nice stretch and release of the pelvic floor. One of my all-time favorites. Let's look at a strengthening pose. So we did some poses that are going to work our diaphragm to help the pelvic floor stretch. We did some stretching poses that will widen the bony parts of the pelvis to help those muscles stretch. But if the glute muscles and the supporting muscles are not keeping up with their job, then the pelvic floor is going to have to take on more responsibility. And that's where it tends to be a little tighter. So one of my favorite is a bridge pose. So join me. We're going to roll to our side and then come onto your back. So come onto your side and then onto your back. Now from here, I'm going to use a block between my thighs because I can get a little adductor strengthening. Now this is not your typical yoga bridge where we're looking for a back bend. I'm actually going to try to think about keeping my pelvis and my ribs staying connected. So I'm not going to splay my front ribs up and reach my hip points away. So I'm not coming into a back bend. So I'm squeezing the block. I'll move my hair, and then I'm pushing my feet down. Now from here, I'm thinking about my pubic bone coming towards my face and my tailbone reaching towards my knees. And then I'm pushing my feet down and pulling my heels in. So now my hamstrings are waking up, my hips are engaged, my glutes are engaged, and I'm actively squeezing the block in. So a lot of work in the lower body. And then you can come down and rest. Now, especially if you're in your third trimester, you may want to come down and rest on your side. You can just take that block underneath your head. So those are a few of my favorite labor prep poses, the pelvic floor edition, that you can start at any time.